policy is take your hat off.
Sir, that's my property. You're out of here. Get out. Get out. Get up and get out. You can go under arrest.
What are you guys doing? Why don't you act like real people? Why don't you treat people like people?
This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by the Dover Liberty Book Club.
Pete Eyre from libertyontour.com was assaulted and kidnapped today in a courtroom here in Keene, New Hampshire. And all of it was because he was wearing his hat. And this isn't actually the first time something like this has happened. It was actually about 2 years ago in another district court here in New Hampshire where a different activist was also arrested for wearing a hat in court. Mm-hmm. He ended up going to trial and being found guilty for that. And I'm not sure what even the charge is going to be in this case because as of right now, no one has seen Pete since he's been arrested. He's currently sitting in the county jail as a result of his refusal to answer their questions about who he is.
Yeah, that's good. It's not done out of disrespect. Well, policy is take your hat off.
Whose policy is that?
That's the court's policy. You want to go out?
I didn't sign that policy. I didn't sign that policy.
Sir, please don't touch me.
What? Sir, that's my property. You're out of here. Get out. Get out. Get up and get out. You can go under arrest.
Hey, man, what are you guys doing?
What the hell, you guys? I don't leave my hat on. It's my property. It's my body. I'm not hurting anything.
What are you guys doing? Why don't you act like real people? Why don't you treat people like people? What are you doing?
What are you guys doing, man? He's a peaceful person.
The judge, the man in the robe, interestingly enough, was actually not in the courtroom at this time. So what had happened is a bunch of activists were in the court to back up some of their friends who are actually going to be on trial for a couple of other things today, namely trespassing and, a possession of paraphernalia. And so a bunch of folks were in there already. Pete was one of those people, and he was just sitting in there quietly, not making a ruckus or anything like that, when one of the bailiffs comes over and starts to harass him for wearing the hat. And he says, well, you have to take the hat off because it's policy. And Pete asked, well, what policy? I didn't sign your policy. I don't, what are you talking about, basically? And so it wasn't, I don't think he got much more than one extra warning beyond the first one before the police prosecutor, who's also a police officer and is there in uniform, basically just turns right around and grabs Pete. Pete doesn't want to assist in his own kidnapping, so he went limp. And there was another police officer who was actually in the room already who was going to testify at one of the trials. So he comes up, and both of them essentially manhandle Pete.
Excuse me, sir, you're blocking a walkway. Excuse me, sir, you're blocking the walkway.
They grab him. They, basically drag him out of the courtroom.
Yeah. So they weren't putting up with any guff from Free Staters today, were they? They were just.
No, they definitely were in a mood to get somebody. And Michelle.
Well, you say they, and
them fellas.
Historically, the issue with removing your hat is a contempt of court issue, which it's my understanding that actually only the judge can assign a contempt of court charge.
That's true. So in this case, he probably will be charged with some other catch-all like disorderly conduct.
Or resisting.
Oh, they're going to get him for that, too, because anytime you don't go along with what they want you to do when they're kidnapping you, anytime you don't help assist them in their kidnapping, they usually consider that so-called resisting.
Right. They'll trump on however many charges they can.
Right. It's not like Pete reached out and jacked one of the cops in the head as they were trying to cuff him. He just went limp. He did not assist them.
Not only that, you see I'm wearing a hat. It's -5 degrees out there.
It was -20 when I walked to court this morning.
What's your name, sir? Don't want to tell people your name?
That's really cool, guys.
At what point do you say no, Officer Griffin? How do you say no more? What do you say?
And so there he was. He, refused to, remove his hat or whatever. Now, what if someone were in the military and they're supposed to be wearing a hat? Do they get to wear a hat inside?
Well,
What if
apparently the
someone-
police get to wear a hat because, as you can see over the Cop Block post, if you go to copblock.org, it's the first Free Pete wearing a hat is not a crime post. You scroll down past the video, and there's actually a still photo that one of the activists took in the courtroom of a Keene police officer in the court with a skull cap on. So moments after they arrest our friend and drag him out of the court for having a hat on, the Keene cop, a different Keene cop, comes in and is in court walking around with a hat on. Of course, nobody has a problem with that.
Blasphemy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So
it's shameful.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
this is
it's
how it
ridiculous
works,
and hypocritical, and like it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I mean,
Pete Eyre, yeah, he's a great guy.
yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's like he's so tough and stocky and built, you know, like a tank, but he's so
Gentle
humble.
giant.
Exactly.
He's very respectful. I mean, Pete is generally,
Absolutely.
even with his conversations with his kidnappers, I mean, he was never yelling at them. He was never angry at them. He was just asking questions. You can hear him asking some of his questions in the video, asking questions of them as to why they would do this to a peaceful person, that he wasn't, pointing out that he wasn't causing any disruption or anything like that, and really manages to keep his cool even under a situation in which a lot of us might lose it. So good for him for that.
This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by the Dover Liberty Book Club. In addition to eating lots of pastries and drinking lots of coffee, they are dedicated to learning about the basic principles which explain our current economic and social situation. And speaking of economic situations, you'll be glad to know most of the books they read are free. Dover Liberty Book Club.